Okay, good morning. My name's Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. And our bare fruit trees finally arrived here in mid-January. Not the latest we've ever gotten them, but we usually try to get them by New Year's Day. So we're running a little bit late, but they look good. They've come in. We're missing a few things. Today we'll be talking about apples and pears, and truthfully we sell more varieties of apples than any other fruit tree, except for avocado. We sell a lot of avocado. That'll be a few months from now. But the apple trees, 2 generations ago, we didn't sell them. We didn't think they grew here. And all the books said they don't grow here. They need an average of 700, 800 hours of chill in the winter to bloom and fruit. But slowly by the 1980s, people were telling us, you got to grow this apple tree. So we started growing a few, and they made good fruit. Just about every apple we tried makes good fruit. So about 15 years ago, our supplier of bare root trees, Dave Wilson Nursery, they planted like 100 types of apples in the Irvine field station, and discovered after a few years that only 2 apples there didn't make a commercial quality fruit. All the other apples made fruit, perhaps not at the right time, but they made good fruit. The only 2, unfortunately, one of the 2 that didn't do well is one of our most asked for apples. It's Honeycrisp, and that doesn't do well. So we'll kind of explain that. But apples, just about any of them you want to grow, do well. Pears, we're still trying to figure out. We think we have a good handle of what's going on with pear trees. There's a few that are reliable, but the few that are reliable aren't that good a pear. And what's intriguing is sometimes the pears that aren't reliable have a great crop. And we're trying to figure out what makes that crop do well that year, whereas a lot of years they don't do well. So we think we have a handle on pears, so we'll get through with that. But the apple trees, what's going on with them is most of them require about 700 or 800 hours of chill. We get here, like this year, we've gotten maybe 150 hours, just not even close. Now, hopefully by the end of winter, which is mid-March, we'll have about 300 hours of chill. Doesn't look good right now. We're not getting much chill at all. You know, we got maybe an hour of chill last night. But it doesn't take much to do it. If we have 3 weeks where the weather doesn't break 65, you got the chill. So hopefully that'll happen. I mean, if it was like 5 years ago, it all happened in March. We didn't have any winter, and suddenly in March, we had a series of cool storms come through, and everything bloomed at the end of March, which was amazing. But anyway, we only get about 300, 350 hours of chill. There are a few people who live along the big riverbeds or in the canyons who can get 400 hours of chill, but still not usually close to what the apples require, which is 700, 800. Now, throughout the Central Valley of California, they get that. If you ever visit the Central Valley in the fall, it's fogged over, there's no sun, it stays cool during the day. It just accumulates chill like crazy. Now, chill, just so you know, is anything below 55 and above 34. Maximum chill is around 45. So even though they say you get an hour chill, you don't. You get less chill around 34, 35. You get less chill at 50 to 55. You get a whole bunch of chill around 40, 45. A professor at Miracosta College said it's a bell curve. It's not this box thing that some computers calculate. It's a bell curve. So at this moment, we're probably about 55. So we're not getting chill at this time. So anyway, the apples, what most apples do is that if they don't have leaves on them and it's around 80 degrees, they start growing. But to start growing, they have to blow open their flower buds first. So usually here we get to May or June and it's 80 degrees. And if they have no leaves, they're growing and they're blooming. Now, if they get their chill like they do in Oregon, they're blooming in April. So here we're a month or two late. And because of that, the apples ripen a month or two later here than they do in Oregon, but we have the weather to ripen them. So as long as the fall stays warm and the leaves stay on the tree, they'll ripen December, January instead of October, November, where they ripen mostly in Oregon. Now there's a few apples that are super low chill, and we'll go over those too. So generally they tend to work here. There's the problem with Honeycrisp is that because it was developed in Minnesota, it wakes up really late because they don't want to wake up early in Minnesota because the danger of frost there. But the other problem is it ripens in July. So, late July. So here they often wake up in July and then they ripen late July with the apple this big. I mean, they look like miniature Honeycrisp apples. They taste fine, but they don't have time to get size. So that's the problem. The other thing about Minnesota is that they're also closer to the Arctic Circle, so they get those 20-hour days. And here we're stuck with maybe a 13, 14-hour day, so their Honeycrisp can get the full size. I mean, a lot of people say they grow better Honeycrisp in Oregon and Northern California because they wake up earlier and they have longer days. We still have fairly long days there. So, but that's the problem with Honeycrisp. They look, we grew them for 10 years. The biggest apples we got on Honeycrisp were maybe the size of small apricots. So you can grow Honeycrisp. We don't sell it. If you want, we can get it. But unless you live, like they said, they're getting decent sized Honeycrisp in Riverside. Riverside gets more chill than we do, and they got hot earlier than we do. So that's the two factors they've got going for them. But in Irvine at the field station, they say they make apples. They come out that big. So, okay, so on the apple trees, well, let's see. We weren't expecting to get it. So every year we order the espaliered apples, and they didn't confirm them this year for us. But we got some. So I've got like 5 of these only. If they have more on availability sheets, we'll certainly get them in. But this is unusual. So this is an M111 rootstock. So we'll talk about apple rootstocks with 6 different apple trees grafted onto it, each trained out to a different level. Now, to us, this is too short. You put that in the ground, it's this tall. So it's meant for a container or a raised bed to get it up off where you can actually see it. But there's 6 different apples on here. So we've got Dorset Golden, Anna, Gala, Fuji, Granny Smith, and Braeburn. All really good apples. Well, Dorset's not one of my favorites, but the rest of the apples are all good apples. So all this will produce here. It's easy to espalier an apple. So one thing about apple trees and pear trees is their branches are real rubbery. So you can take them and do what you want with them. Whereas you do this with a plum tree, you'll break the branch off. But apple trees, real rubbery. I mean, sometimes if you don't have the branch on the right side, you can just take the branch and turn it all the way around the other side of the tree. So this is a bare root, 112 bare root. If it's in a pot, it'll be closer to $200. And if I buy it from another company who put it in a pot, it'll be over $200. These are the bare root apples we just got. Now, we didn't have time to put them on display. Yesterday, the truck arrived at 11:30. It took us 2 hours to load the truck, 2 hours to relocate the plants in order, and another hour to cover them with blankets. By that time, I was exhausted. And so we'll work on the bare roots this afternoon. But this is what apples look like when they come to us. This is the smallest apple we got. This is a medium size. This came in last year about this size. It came in already with over 1 inch in diameter trunk. This is called 5/8, and this is, I think this is 3/8 inch trunk. Pencil thick. But apples are pretty strong, even if you get one smaller than this. You usually buy, you know, they're also fast. So if you get an apple tree this big, by the end of this year, we expect it to be 10 foot. Now, you may not want it to be 10 foot. So generally, you don't have to, you know, like some people tell us, don't prune the bare root for me. I want it to be as big as possible. We tell them, that's not your goal. Your goal is to have a fruit tree you can pick. So these are coming to us on 2 rootstocks. One is, this says M7 on the back of the tag, and this is M111. Those are the 2 rootstocks we get apples on. M111 is semi-dwarf, which dwarfs it. So full-size apple trees usually grow about 20 to 25 feet. Semi-dwarf 15 to 18 if you don't trim them. And this is M7, which is a smaller tree that makes it to about 10, 12 feet. So it's a little smaller than this one. The standard rootstocks on the apples are more drought tolerant, but we don't want them because they usually don't start flowering for 5 years. They're just too vigorous. They grow, and they don't stop to bloom. So M111, we like it because this is loaded with flower buds. There's like 30 or 40 flower buds on here. This one on M7, well, this is a smaller plant too, M7. This one will probably have 3 or 4 flower buds on it. So the flowers on apple trees formed at the end of branches because the last leaves on the branch have more sunlight. So they're always at the ends of the branches. But apple trees are known for making spur branches, which are these really short branches that have that flowers on them. So like this branch here, you can see all these little short branches. These are the apple spurs. They'll have one at the tip. The one at the tip will make apples that sunburn. So you don't want them on the tips if you can help it. The ones inside the tree on these spurs are usually shaded by the branches above them enough so they don't sunburn. When the trees are young, you don't have a choice. This may be a flower bud here, maybe a flower bud here. They don't have their spurs yet. Now, apple trees are really strong. They're actually the best tree at healing wounds of any plant known. According to U.S. Forest Department, you trim an apple tree anywhere, it seals the wound right there. Very good at sealing wounds, which is interesting. They're in the rose family. The worst plant known for sealing are peaches and nectarines, which are in the same family, but they don't seal their wounds well at all. So apple orchards generally are still often in operation 150 years later. Peach orchards 15 years down the road, they're gone. They replace them. Now for homeowner, peach orchards still good for 20. The trees are going downhill, but that's still plenty of peaches. Apple trees, you can have these forever. They can outlive us. The one thing that apples need, though, is they need the soil to be wet. So I have a apple tree book written by an Oregon orchard person who's been in that business for generations. He says, we don't understand how you can grow apples in California, because in Oregon, they want the soil to be wet 5 foot deep. They said, if the trees have that extra moisture 5 foot deep, they make a better crop. Now, to get moisture down 5 foot deep, you need like 30 or 40 inches of rain. And we just don't get, we've gotten that in the last 50 years, we've gotten it maybe 3 or 4 times. I should mention, so these are grafted to the rootstocks right here. We don't want to bury them too deep, because if you bury them up to here, it doesn't kill the tree. The apples don't need much oxygen in the roots, but if they grow roots out of their stem, it's now become a standard apple tree. It'll grow faster it'll grow faster, which you may not want. And it may not produce as early if it roots in out of here, because it's now a standard apple tree rather than a semi-dwarf. So you don't want to bury any deeper than the bud union. Originally, they were grafted in field about 3 or 4 inches below the graft. This one was a little bit shorter. And the other thing is, apple stems can sunburn, especially if they're at an angle like this one is. So if the sun's hitting this one right here, we've seen them sunburn in the past from like 100-degree weather and the sun hitting this. So if you have a choice, if it's got a big dog leg down here, sometimes they're pretty straight up and you don't worry about it. But if they are, you can face the grafted side of the tree toward the south so the sun can't hit this. I've only seen it happen once in my yard, so it's not that critical, but you can do that just to play it safe. Because usually by summer, the tree, when it gets hot, the tree is full of foliage. But if we do have a real early heat, case we get 100 degrees in May, and we've even seen it in April, that's a chance when the apple trees haven't leafed out yet that they'll sunburn. Now, commercially, when they plant bare-rooted trees of any type, they tell the orchard don't fertilize them the first year. And that's because they don't want them to grow very much. Because most orchards don't have good windbreaks. Like we have houses and walls, the buildings and walls to slow the wind down. So if you have an orchard where the tree grows 6 or 8 foot the first year, and then there's a bad wind that comes through, it may blow it over because the roots haven't developed as well yet. So they don't want to fertilize them the first year. They said leave them alone the first year so they just get a good anchorage. But we're not that concerned. We'll go ahead and fertilize them the first year and then keep them trimmed to your picking height, because the apple trees will put on 3 feet by summer and 3 more feet by fall. So if you don't want them out of picking height, just prune them back a bit. So fertilizer-wise, you're safest with the organics. So we carry 2 organic companies now, Down to Earth and True Organic. There are other sources. We do sell chicken manure, and you could just put a bunch of compost on the ground and that will feed them also, although it'll start a little slower. In containers, when we grow these in pots, we use the Osmocote. When I was a kid, we used organics, but my dad told me, you water once a day and you fertilize once a month, and it's just a lot of work to go through your nursery and fertilize it every month. I mean, it's what we used to do, but the Osmocote, you can feed them once every 6 months. So what we usually do is fertilize them initially with this, and if we have to redo it. If they've been here longer than 6 months, we will throw an organic on them. The organics are better in the long run because plants need 13 minerals that you apply, and the organics have all 13. This only has 10. So it's missing 3 of the minor nutrients, we call them micronutrients, which some of the micros are actually found in soil. Well, most of them are found in real dirt. And our soil has some of them, the micros in it. Oh, so if you're going in a pot, we do recommend our top potting soil, because we do consider it a permanent soil. There's very few potting soils out there. I mean, I think there's one other one in the US that we've seen that we can call permanent. So after a year, it hasn't shrunk. So this is, pear tree has been in this pot for an entire year, and it doesn't look like it shrank at all. Whereas most potting soils are down to about 2/3 the volume or even half the volume by that time, because they don't make them out of permanent materials. Now, most plants don't like the non-permanent materials as potting soil. It usually kills them after a while. Apples and pears, the roots are really tolerant of bad conditions. So even if you use a short-term potting soil that everyone else sells, they'll probably make it. They won't be happy, but they'll make it and they'll do okay. So. Okay, so usually when you plant them, now most apple trees we get have decent branching. So you don't have to worry about the branching, but I noticed that some of the apples came in with just 1 or 2 branches. So the ideal shape to make an apple tree for production, conventional shape. Now you can do espaliering with your apple trees on fences. And because their branches are so soft, you can just take a regular apple tree and form them into a espalier yourself. The only things that they do right now are when they have 3 different apples or 6 different apples on them, they quit doing the single ones because they didn't sell enough. I guess they didn't sell enough of them because it's so easy to make an espalier yourself at a much lower price, that they quit offering the single variety espaliers and just offer the 3-in-1 and 6-in-1 types. So the ideal form of an apple tree, they changed it. I mean, in the past, we used to train apple trees to be open vases, which took years and years to develop that. So now the conventional form for an apple tree is a Christmas tree form. So they call that a spindle shape, where you have tiers of branches about every foot up. It didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to be lined up perfectly, but tiers of branches. So it's hard to do that in a container because it takes up a lot of room. I mean, this one you can change it over that fairly easily, although this one's developing a secondary trunk, which is okay. I mean, what they don't want you to do is waste time making more trunks. Just have a single trunk with tiers of branches, because the side growing branches fruit and the single one in the trunk doesn't. Single trunk in the center doesn't fruit. So the fewer of these you have, the more efficient your tree will be. But if it already made 2, just leave it. So this branch would be better if we can, and you can probably chop it off and use this branch going this way to be that tier. But you know, it's hard for us to do in a pot. I mean, it's easier to do this in the ground because you can tie the branches down. Doesn't have to be perfectly level, but fairly level, and just different tiers all the way up. And you'll get a lot of apples. I mean, each one of these flower buds makes 5 to 10 flowers. And this has got a flower bud here. So you have to thin them out after they form, So after they bloom, you wait until the apples are bigger than a marble. At that point, they're set and they will make an apple. But if you have 5 apples right here, they're going to start knocking each other off, or you'll break the branch off from the weight. So you only allow one of those to develop, and you want them at least, say, 5 inches apart on your stem. So you can actually break off the extra fruiting spurs if you like, or just leave them, but cut off all the apples. So this thing will probably develop more fruiting spurs all along this branch. So you'll have plenty to choose from. So this branch can fruit, a single branch can fruit for well over a decade. And you don't have to let it get any bigger than that. I mean, this tree this coming year can probably make 50, 60 apples. And you've got about a month to a month and a half to harvest. So you may not want more than that. Now, some apples hang better. This one happens not to. We'll talk about that. But some apples in Southern California will hang for 3 months after they're ripe without losing anything. In any other state, it'd get too cold, they'd just drop off. But here they can stay on there for a long, long time. And even this apple, which has poor hang time, the apples stay better when they're hanging than if you pick them off. So, okay, so that's the ideal form for production per square foot. Because the big open vases we used to make, you'd get more apples, but fewer per square foot, because it's not as, well, when you have an apple tree that's 20 foot across, which is what they used to do, the sunlight can't get in past 3 feet. So you've got a big dead space in the middle of the tree that's too dark. Whereas if you have it this big, say 3 foot out this direction, 3 foot out this direction, the entire tree is productive. So more fruit per square foot, you can fit more trees in your yard, have more different apples. We've got I think 15 varieties of apples out there. And that's more than any other bare root tree we get in, just because they all do well. And they all have different, the nice thing about apples, your first apples ripen around June. And the last apples ripen around December. And the apples that ripen in December can hang on till March. So you've covered 3/4 of the year with, say, 3 or 4 apple trees. You can, if you like apples, which are probably better for you since they're not as sweet as a lot of fruit. But you can have apples. Well, you actually can have apples year round. There are some apple trees that don't. We'll talk about those too. Now, disease-wise, there is one really bad disease that both apples and pears get. It's fire blight. And this is such it's like, how did this thing evolve? So fire blight is a disease carried by the bees, and you need the bees to pollinate, but they can also bring fire blight to your tree. So now we have a spray called Garden Foss that does a great job protecting the tree from fire blight. By Monterey. So Garden Foss is not registered. Well, in many states in the United States, this is registered as a fertilizer. It's mono and dipotassium salts of phosphorus acid. Now, phosphorus is a fertilizer, potassium is a fertilizer. So it's actually in many states registered more as a fertilizer. On the instructions at the back, there's no waiting time for anything. You spray your vegetables, eat them because it's really a fertilizer. It's not really, quote, a chemical fungicide that kills things. The phosphorus, apparently, when you beef up the amount of phosphorus in the plant, it helps it fight off the diseases better. So you can spray garden phos, and there's quite a few instructions on here. Right before the tree blooms, you can spray it on real heavy onto the trunk at a high dose. Once it does bloom, you have to spray it on a lighter dose. The heavy dose will burn all the leaves and flower buds. You have to be careful not to do the heavy dose. Yes.
Affect the bees.
Not if you spray it before. It's not a poison though. It shouldn't affect the bees at all because it's just fertilizer.
So you're spraying it before the blossoms start?
That's the safest thing to do. So fire blight is a disease carried by bees. And again, if you just are observant, you're out in your yard every week, you don't have to spray the garden phos. You just look at your flower petals. So their apple flowers are pink buds that open to white flowers. And as they dry, they turn kind of tan. Now, if they got infected by fire blight by the bee, it turns black or gray. And when you see a black or gray flower bud, you just snap off that entire cluster of flowers and you've stopped it. Because the problem with fire blight, it is a bacterial infection that causes a gangrene-like reaction. So it gets the flowers, goes down the stem to the trunk. If the tree's young, can kill the tree. If on older trees, it usually just kills the branch and stops at the trunk, but still we don't like to see it. So they say on pear trees especially, pear trees usually die from all the fire blight attacks it's withstood over the years. It finally gets to the tree, and apples too. Too much fire blight on the tree, it eventually just wipes it out. But it cuts off the circulation. So if you got hit by fire blight here and it gets to this stem, the rest of the stem just turns black and dies. So what happens, the way it's transmitted, if you don't cut the stem off that gets fire blight, you got this dead stem. It's got the fire blight bacteria still in here. If it rains in the winter and spring, the fire blight disease wakes up in these dead branches and starts creating this ooze on the outside of the branch that looks just like honey. So the bees land on it, and they collect the spores and then carry it to the flower buds. So that disease evolved real interestingly, where it gets wet from the rains and it starts oozing to the surface. So we get fire blight more on wet winters than on dry winters because the bacterial oozes to the surface on a wet winter. It's the worst 2 wet winters in a row, and everything gets hit. I mean, I had a gal apple in my yard that it seemed like every flower bud got fire blight, so the whole tree was turning black. And I'm going, okay, the only way to save this tree is to amputate about 1 foot off the ground. So I had to do that, lost that crop for the year, of course, but it grew back to the same size in 1 year, and I had to crop the next year. So it recovered fast, but I had to save it by amputating it all the way below all the branches because it was bad. Gala apple trees, highly susceptible to fire blight, the most susceptible out there. Some trees are just about immune. I mean, my neighbor's Granny Smith apple, he never treated it. We saw it get fire blight on flowers. It never seemed to hurt the tree. So Granny Smith is essentially immune to that. So, but all apples can get it, and all pears can get it. And pears have a worse reaction than apples do many times. So watch that. So that's its main problem. They can get mildew on the leaves. It never seems to hurt them much. Although the last 3 years we've gotten a lot of mildew on the apples just because it's been so cloudy all summer. Lots of overcast in the summer. So our winters are getting warmer and our summers are getting cooler. which is actually, you know, okay for the apples. They don't mind the cool summer temperatures. So the main thing with apples, they said if you're too hot the 2 weeks before they harvest, that can mess up the apples. But we haven't had too hot of weather, you know, 90-degree weather on weeks on end like we used to. The last time we had that was 4 years ago, I think now. It was real hot during the summer where you would have damaged the apples. So we've had some really good apple crops the last 3 years. It's just been really, really mild. Apples originated in what's now Turkmenistan, what used to be southern Russia. But that's a real cold winter climate. So what's interesting is now they grow apples throughout the world. I mean, some of the most famous apples we carry are from Australia. And Australia is our climate to Mexico's climate, which is quite tropical. And I mean, Granny Smith apples, which are grown in Oregon, come from Sydney, Australia. And we thought, okay, it's got to be a mountain near Sydney. Then we looked up a picture of right where it was found on a delta region in Sydney, Australia. And it showed pictures of the Granny Smith orchards next to pineapple plantations. So that apple came from the tropics, even though it acts like a temperate zone apple tree. It came from the tropics. Now, two other apple trees, Pink Lady and Sundowner. Sundowner has been my favorite apple. Come from Perth, Australia, which is our climate. Although, you know, the same latitude as Los Angeles, but Australia is a little harsher because on the southern hemisphere, we're closer to the sun on their summer and further away from the sun in their winter. Northern hemisphere, we're closer to the sun in winter and we're farther away in summer. So they've got a little more extreme temperatures in Australia than we do because of that fact. So, but those are some of the most popular apples in the world now are coming out of the tropics. So in the late 80s, we read an article about they're growing apples in the Philippines. We're going, well, the Philippines, totally tropical. You know, the coldest temperatures they get in the Philippines are in the high 50s on the mountains. And they were growing them in the mountains. And there the apples are essentially evergreen. But what they found out is that, and they were growing Rome Beauty apples, which are evolved in New York. Selected in New York. So that's an apple that has a lot of chill requirement, like 1,000 hours of chill. And here they're grown in the Philippines. What they said they did is whenever they want them to flower, they just stripped off all the leaves. And 2 weeks later, they were in full bloom. And then 4 or 5 months later, the apples were ripe. And after the apples were picked, they stripped off all the leaves again and they get another crop. Now, we can't do that here on most years because our falls are too cool to get any size on the apples for the winter. So we can't do the 2-crop thing on most apples. I mean, some apples, we'll talk about those that are very tropical, can flower and fruit year round, but most of our apples won't operate at temperatures below 80 degrees or won't get going. So we only have the 1 crop year on most of our apple trees. But again, there are exceptions. But so this year at an orchard nearby, I noticed that one of their apple trees is starting to lose their leaves, but the other one is still fully in leaf. So if our winter's not cold enough to knock the leaves off, you want the leaves off your tree about, say, a month before you expect them to bloom. So most apple trees, we expect them to bloom in May, which means take them off, say, in April or even a little before April, because they will gather energy all year if you leave the leaves on them to be stronger to make more fruit. So you might as well leave, some people knock the leaves off in winter, but if you leave them on until they, I don't know that the leaves being on the tree affect the chill that the flower buds get. We don't get enough chill here anyway. So you might as well collect the extra energy and knock the leaves off, say a month before they bloom, so that you'll get that better bloom on them, because they don't bloom well with the leaves. So some years you may have to strip them. It's easy to strip them. You just do this on with your fingers and go down the branch, and they zip right off.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
I got 4 or 5 different kinds of apples, and I get a lot of size variation on a given tree. And this year I got apples that were this big, and I got apples that were very large. Is that normal for an apple tree, or am I doing something wrong?
Well, it's the number of apples on the branch makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So the more apples you have on a single branch, the smaller they'll be, and the worse they taste. And the fewer apples, the bigger they'll be, and the better they taste. They actually did a study because back in the 80s when Fuji first arrived, the first year on the market, they were real good tasting. And then a few years later, they were real bland. And the University of California says, well, you're growing too many apples on your Fuji apple trees. They're getting all tasteless and smaller. So they did a test to see how many apples the tree can successfully make as good as they wanted. They said 1 apple per every 27 leaves. So they counted the leaves on the tree to see how many apples the tree can make. And it is the branch. So each branch, so the apples get all their energy from just a few inches around them. So just count each branch as a separate branch, because the energy in here can't help the apple on this side. So watch the number of apples you allow to be on your tree, and that'll make them so fewer apples, bigger apples, more water, bigger apples. But if you're getting different size on the same tree, it's just the amount of apples on that branch.
And I've got a very large tree that's 20 years old, and it doesn't produce any apples. And I've trimmed it for years, and I'll get flowers, but no finished product.
That's odd. Usually the only thing that stops them is no bees and and not enough water. So they, on apples at my house, if the ground didn't look wet, the tree was struggling. So I make sure the ground, because about 4 years after I planted my apple trees weren't looking very good. They had brown tips all over them. I'm going, well, God, my apple trees just don't look good. I was watering the same from the day I planted them, which was about 4 gallons per tree on drip, but they just didn't look good. What I didn't realize, of course, is the trees all around my apple trees were growing bigger and taking the water. My apple trees were also bigger. The next year we had an El Nino and it rained like 28 inches, and the apple trees looked great that year. I'm going, okay, I have to up the water, because my neighbor's trees and behind the fence and everything was stealing the water from my apples, and the apple trees were bigger, so they just weren't getting enough water. So I kind of doubled the water on the trees, and they looked fine after that, and the fruiting was fine too. But if they don't look, tree has to look really good. You can't have those brown edges on them. And they have to always be, nice and open, not folded up. That's a sign of lack of water too. Hope that helps, but I wouldn't know any other reason. I mean, they don't need much fertilizer. It's mainly water. Like they say in Oregon, they want the soil to be wet 5 foot deep. So, okay. Now, apples can get worms. We have the codling moth here that'll get the worm in the apple. The only time most apples get worms is if 2 apples are touching, or if the apple's touching a branch, because the codling moth has to hide its eggs, because there's plenty of predators around, lacewings, ladybugs, and they find the codling moth egg, they'll just eat it. So codling moths typically hide eggs between 2 fruit, and you'll get a hole in both of them. So if you just thin out the apples down to one apple and make sure it doesn't touch a branch or a leaf or anything like that, you rarely get a codling moth in it. Now, I've had 2 apples over the years that still got codling moths. One was John and Gold and one was Mutsu, even if I thinned them down. So the other way to stop the codling moth, University of California, for organic orchards 40 years ago, they said get a number 2 paper bag from Smart and Final Iris or a lunch bag and cut a hole in the bottom of it. Slice a hole that's big enough to slip over the fruit when it's about the size of a golf ball, and roll up the bag, and the apple will develop in there. No predator will, they won't notice what it is, and the birds won't eat it. It's just a paper bag hanging on your tree. Now, Sunset Magazine in the 90s came out and said, no, the apples don't color up as well in the paper bags. If you put a Ziploc bag on them, it's just as good and colors better. And they did mention to punch a hole or cut out one of the corners of the plastic bag to let any moisture out. But you put the Ziploc bag over it, that'll stop the codling moths. Won't stop a squirrel, unfortunately, but it'll stop a codling moth from getting to it. Now that we have spinosad, that's another way to stop codling moths with one of the spinosad products. But just know you'd have to spray this every 2 weeks to stop the codling moths from getting into the fruit. Spinosad is considered organic. Same goes for pears on the codling moths and the fire blight. So, okay, so the main thing is don't let them touch, and generally we don't see the codling moths. Okay, let's see. Now, mildew, if you get mildew and you want to stop it, oil sprays, and they're considered organic also. They have the organic little insignia on them. And usually with the oil, it's even better if you add a little bit of baking soda to it. So in a quart, it's like 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. You just take the top off, put it in there, shake it up, and you can use that as it goes along. It won't go bad. In a gallon of water, it's 1 tablespoon of baking soda and 4 tablespoons of the oil concentrate. And that's what we do here at the nursery when we're treating mildew on apples, pears, peaches, plums, roses, mangoes. And we do it pretty much every week or 2. Okay, we'll go over some of the apple varieties, or all of the ones we carry at least. So we'll go over by bloom time and harvest time. The first one to bloom is Dorset Golden. It blooms end of January. So that one, Dorset Golden, was found in the Bahamas, growing in the Bahamas, and it just doesn't need much winter at all. It's always in bloom by late January. But the apples, so bloom and harvest, unfortunately harvest in June. And if we have June bloom going on, it's pretty tart. It doesn't sweeten up. Now, people in Riverside do well with Dorset Golden. So if you're in a hot climate, desert, my in-laws in Hemet loved it. So for people who have some early sunlight, Anaheim Hills, you might get enough sunlight there to ripen this thing. But for us, it was too early and stayed too tart. There's a very similar apple from Israel called Einschmier, and it's hard to tell apart between Dorset Golden and Einschmier. The next one to bloom is Anna. It blooms February and ripens in July. This is Anna right here. You can see it's getting ready to bloom. The buds are swelling. it's a pretty darn good apple. So Dorset Golden's a yellow apple, yellowish green apple that looks like Golden Delicious, and it's a daughter of Golden Delicious. Anna is from Israel, and we use Dorset to pollinate it. So apples don't need pollination to make fruit, but if you pollinate them, you get a little better quality fruit. In my yard, I did not like the Dorset enough to keep it, so I pulled it out, had the Anna by itself. It still made apples, still seemed to make all of them, but they were a little smaller, and they were often flat-sided because they're missing seeds. So I'd cut open the apple, as one seed in there, so it had a flat side on the other side of the fruit. So that's why you want a pollinator, especially if you're commercial, to get a better looking apple. But I didn't like the Dorset enough to put it back in my yard, so I just left it, and we still got a good crop of Anna apples. Dorset and Anna, they ripen so early that both of those will bloom again. You know, if you back off the water at all in the summertime, it shocks them. They lose a few leaves and then they start blooming again. Or all you have to do is, after you harvest them, is knock off some leaves and that branch will bloom. And we've had some customers who apparently don't water well. They said, oh, we get apples off our apple any time of the year. They can pick an apple off their end. Now, if you're real good at watering, you'd have to knock the leaves off to get them to rebloom. But we have enough time to get them to rebloom and make a crop, usually by November. That second big crop is off the tree. Now, the problem with the early apples is neither one has hang time or shelf life. Compared to all the other apples, these do not have good hang time or good shelf life. So an apple is supposed to be 3/4 red. Once it turns entirely red, it starts to mush out on you. Although I still like them when they're totally red, but it's nice to pick them when they're about 3/4 red. So they don't hang well on the tree. They both, Anna and Dorset, have maybe 1 or 2 day shelf life before they get mushy. Now you can store them in the fridge in a Ziploc bag. So oxygen is the thing that makes apples ripen. So if you put them in a Ziploc bag. Now, one of our former employees said her mother had always done it this way before even knowing the reason why it worked. She used to put them in a Ziploc bag, put a straw in one end, close the bag, suck out all the air, and then seal it. And the apples will last in a refrigerator in a Ziploc bag. Now, they may last even outside with no refrigeration. As long as you get the air out of them, it'll probably keep them from ripening. But in the fridge, easy 2 months storage.
Seems like a lot of work for an apple.
They're pretty good though. So Anna apples, I mean, these are big apples. They can be like that. They're they look like a Red Delicious. Well, a little more vase shaped than Red Delicious. Red Delicious tends to be barrel shaped, and these are a little bit more V shaped, or whatever you call that, with the high shoulders. And their texture is crispy but tender, kind of like a Honey Crisp, crispy but tender. Good flavor, not quite as tart as you might like, but good flavor. And they can make apples year round, which is why it's so popular. So the lack of shelf life doesn't hinder it that bad, because they can keep making apples almost anytime you want. But good apple to have in your garden. So that's the Anna. Next one to wake up is usually Gala. So it usually blooms on its own by May, and it ripens in August. I'd say April, May. And all the early apples, for some reason, make a lot of flowers. I mean, On this tree, I can't see any flower buds here, but these will probably develop in the next month or so and bloom. It's just crazy. We see that on Dorset, Anna, and Gala. You can see a branch with no flower showing, and the whole thing blooms. They just develop so quickly anywhere. The main thing is you have to thin them out properly to get some size on them. But both Dorset and now Gala is the one that's really susceptible to fire blight. So know that all the books say the same thing. Very susceptible to fire blight. The nice thing about Anna and Dorset is they bloom so early. The fire blight disease usually isn't around when they wake up. I've never seen Anna or Dorset get fire blight because they wake up so early. The fire blight seems to need a little more heat to get going. Now the problem with waking up early is that if it's raining on the leaves on Anna, they can pick up what's it called? I should have looked it up. There's a disease that apple trees get that looks exactly like black spot on roses. I forgot the name of it. But we've only ever seen it on Anna because Anna and the Dorset, but I didn't have a Dorset in my house during the El Nino. It was raining on the leaves in April and May, and they picked up a lot of black spot that then transferred to the apples themselves. And I can't remember the name of that disease, but generally we don't worry about it because it doesn't usually rain here in April and May. So, and the apple leaves aren't usually out. I mean, all the other apple trees, they're still sleeping, or they have last year's leaves on them. You don't worry about it. So there is that disease. We have fungicides that'll stop it. The same disease that stopped black spot on roses stop the disease on apples. And I wish, hopefully by the end of the class, I remember the name of that disease, but it's not something we've seen except for 1 year in 96 when we had a lot of rain that year. 95. So you got the Gala. Now I have a few Jonagolds left. We didn't carry Jonagold because it doesn't sell that well, but it is it's the late bloom, and it ripens August, September. So I have a few apples from last year, apple trees of Jonagold from last year, but we didn't get the bare roots. It's not that popular for some reason, but it is. Back in the 80s, they said it won a taste test in the 1980s as the best tasting of all the apples. And then there's a few apples that ripen in September. I think that's when, so Spitzenberg. I haven't grown this apple for the last 40 years. I grew it 40 years ago. Hearing that it was Thomas Jefferson's favorite apple. It is on the small side. I mean, it's from, a long time ago, so the apples are only about that big. They've got a real nice snappy flavor. Now, a lot of the old apples, the thing about them is they were meant to be storage apples. So, 200 years ago, we didn't have refrigerators. So the only thing that you can eat that was fresh were apples. You just stored them in your basement at 50 degrees or so, and they would last till spring. So it'd be the only fresh thing you can eat that would give you vitamin C all the way through winter. So everybody grew apple trees 200 years ago because it was your only produce. So a lot of these apples from the old days taste better if you pick them and let them sit a week. It makes them a little less hard, and the flavor picks up, the sugar picks up a bit. But Spitzenberg is quite good. And that ripens around early fall. And then we have the Fuji. and red Fuji, which are the same late bloom. Again, since we're a little bit late here, Fuji's ripen a little later than they would up north, but still it's about early to mid fall. Now the red Fuji, we carry both red Fuji and regular Fuji. Red Fuji wins the taste tests. Regular Fuji wins the taste test if you don't look at it. So what's interesting is 40 years ago, the Washington Apple Association wanted to promote Red Delicious apples because Red Delicious was losing a lot of its popularity at that time. So they wanted to figure out how to tell the consumer how to pick out the best Red Delicious apple. And I said, well, apparently it's the greenest one you see. Tastes better than the totally red one. But they didn't want to promote green Red Delicious apples, so they'd stopped that one. On Fuji's, they said, yeah, if you do a proper taste test, the original Fuji, which is kind of gray-green red, usually wins. But looking at them, you always pick the red one. So we sell the red Fuji's if you want it, but the original Fuji supposedly wins the taste test of the favorite apples among the general population. I mean, people who really love apples will pick a different apple. But among the general population who likes sweeter apples, Fuji is all sugar. Now, all the rest of the apple, well, Ashmead's kernel comes in around that time. Now, Ashmead's kernel is another real old apple. It's an ugly apple. It's not real pretty. It's kind of orangey, I don't know, and bumpy. But boy, everyone eats one and goes, wow, this is a good apple. Now, it's not real crispy, so it's different. But still, everyone who's eaten one really likes it. So it's not a crispy apple, but it's got this texture and flavor that everyone seems to love. So Ashmead's kernel has become real popular among our employees and among our customers. Another one of the older apples. And then all the rest of the apples tend to ripen late fall, early winter. So you've got I'm running out of room. I'll put the last one over here. Okay, so all the rest of these kind of bloom are harvest in the winter or late fall. They all have really good hang time, which is like February, March. So the late apples have a lot of advantages. Great hang time, great shelf life. And all are considered really good tasting. Now, Granny Smith is interesting. So my neighbor grew Granny Smith. He would pick them in November. You know, if you're in Oregon, you pick them in October. He'd pick his November when they're ripe here and make pies out of them. But the tree was half on my property, and I picked them after Christmas. Because after Christmas, the apples turn yellow. and they get sweet, and they get really fragrant. I couldn't believe how, you can smell them. I pull up on my driveway, the tree's halfway to the backyard. I can smell the tree when I open the door because the apples were just fragrant. So the Granny Smith, which is a real unusual apple, they think it's a cross between a French crab and something else, found in Australia. It's 2 apples in one. You can make a pie apple out of it, or you can leave it on a tree till it's really sweet and fragrant. But Arkansas Black we have out here, our customers love to pick that off our tree. Braeburn from New Zealand, one of the better new apples of the world. And then Pink Lady and Sundowner are 2 Australian apples from Perth, Australia. Unfortunately, they changed a lot of names on those 2 apples when they brought them here. In Australia, Pink Lady is Crips Pink, and you've seen that on their labels. Sundowner's Crips Red. They're the same cross by the same guy. In Australia, this is the #1 selling apple, and Pink Lady's #2. So if you like Pink Ladies, which tend to be a little bit tart and a little bit hard, you'll love Sundowners, which are a little bit less tart and a little bit less hard. They're not real popular at the stores. I haven't seen any in a supermarket because they look like red Fujis. They look just like a red Fuji. It's hard to tell them apart, but to me, that's the best tasting apple I've grown, or best eating apple, because to me, it's got the right crispness. It's not as hard as Granny Smith or Pink Lady, but it's still nice and firm. It's got enough tartness, but not too tart. I consider Pink Lady to be a little, and Granny Smith to be a little bit too tart to enjoy nicely. So I think Sundowner's got the best tartness, the best crispness. It's got good size. So Pink Lady, if you grow Pink Lady, all the books say it takes 8 years to get to big apples. They first come out small. Sundowner, we've got some really big apples the very first year. So that's a good apple. Now, if you look at all the expert apple books, the top rated apple in all those books is Yellow Newton Pippin. It's one of the few apples I haven't eaten yet. I've eaten Orange Cox Pippin. I haven't eaten the Yellow Newton Pippin. So I've got that as bare root this year. I'm saving 1 bare root tree from last year to try the apples this year, see what I'm missing. So Yellow Newton Pippin is the top. So this has kind of got an interesting story. A medic, when George Washington was in the British Army in the 1760s, his medic found this in Pennsylvania growing wild. I guess, when was Johnny Appleseed? Was he already distributing apples at that? I think it was already distributing apples at that time. But his medic found it and loved it. They brought the tree back with them to George Washington's orchard, Thomas Jefferson's orchard, and a lot of the big estates were growing the Yellow Newton Pippin apple and selling them to England, because England really liked them too. So that was one of the first exports from the United States back to England, was the Yellow Newton Pippin apple. So a lot of people regard that as the best tasting apple. Hopefully I'll get to eat one this year. Any questions on the apples? Gosh.
2 questions. Sun shade requirement.
Well, full sun. Now, again, the fruit can sunburn a little bit on the ends of the branches. Apples can tolerate a lot of shade, especially, well, all of them can tolerate a lot of shade. It's when I grew out, in my last house, when I planted all my apples, I planted between the houses. But my neighbor's trees got too big and shaded all of them for most of the day. But they all still ripen fine. So the nice thing about apples is they got good enough hang time to get sweet. Like peaches and apricots, you need them in full sun when they ripen, which is mid-year, because they don't have good hang time. If they'll be off the tree in a couple days, and if they're not sweet by then, you're just out of luck. But the apples, you just leave them on the tree till they get good tasting.
Okay.
So if they're not ripe this month, wait till next month. So they don't need, because like when I had my Spitzenberg apple tree, it was almost in total darkness. I mean, I don't know how it got apples at all. It was underneath one of my trees, my neighbor's tree, between houses. It's like, how'd that thing make apples? But they still tasted good. So it's interesting. Apples can handle a lot of shade among the fruit trees. Citrus can handle a lot of shade too, because they also have real good hang time.
Yeah. And so then my other question is, can I grow my own rootstock from the seed of the tree and then graft?
You can. It'll be probably a standard rootstock.
Yeah. But that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So again, if you weren't here early, standard rootstocks can take up to 5 years to fruit.
Right.
Whereas the dwarfing rootstocks, they usually fruit first or second year we have.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, pears. So we hope to have more pear. We ordered like 60, 70 pear trees from our supplier. So far we've gotten less than 10. I don't know if they just had a crop failure or if they're coming later. I don't know. I mean, they were digging late because they had so much rain in November this year. They're digging late, so they may be coming on a later crop, later truck. But I don't know. Our company, Dave Wilson, has new leadership as of last year, and my sales rep is new this year, and they just don't know. My sales rep just doesn't seem to know what's going on. He hasn't been through this before, so I'm asking him. I text, email. I have to do it by email. Where's the rest of the trees? So hopefully we'll get the pears in. So pears come from a little south of where apples originated, so they don't have quite as high a chill requirement. And some migrated east to China and Japan, and some migrated to Europe. So there's European pears and Asian pears, which are all the same species. They interbreed quite well. So you got the Asian pears and the European pears. European pears have done less well than the Asian pears, but the pears that have done the best have been the hybrids. So just so you know, hood pear makes huge crops of tasteless pears. I mean, I had a hood pear. I get well over 100 pears on the tree every year, but I just wouldn't eat them. They just were kind of bland. They look good. They taste okay, but nothing like the best European or the best Asian pears.
So question, do you have, because you kind of sold me off pears a little bit, do you have a pear that you would say, this is a great pear and should grow in our yard?
Well, it'll grow, it may not produce every year. So that's the problem we're finding. So the best of the Asian pears is Hosui. And that one has done well, and it hasn't done well. We're trying to figure out what makes it do well. So what happened so Hosui, the ones we ordered are Hosui in 20th century. Hosui is a big brown pear, and Hosui is 20th century is a kind of a flat yellow pear. You can buy them at the store almost any time of the year, it seems. The Hosuis, they're really good. So the Asian pears versus European. Asians think European pears are slimy sweet. And Asian pears are more like shaved ice. Very tender, but crispy. And very juicy. Of course, European pears are juicy too. But so Asian people think European pears are too slimy sweet. And I do, in my own taste buds, Hosui is the best pear I've ever eaten.
But it's kind of hit and miss in this area.
Well, what happened was about 5 years ago, I think it's 5 years ago now, we had a good crop on Hosui in 20th century in most of our pear trees. And the difference of that year was we had, kind of a normal, not real cold winter, but normal winter. But it was 80 degrees in February, and it was 100 degrees in April, and all the pear trees bloom that year. And the crop ripens when the pears ripen in summer. So all the pears are ripe late July into August. And then the next year we had 500 hours of chill. We said, okay, we're going to have a good pear year this year because we got really good chill. They didn't bloom at all because it didn't warm up until June that year. It was just cold all the way into June. They didn't bloom. We're going, my God, they blanked on us. And then the following 2 years were closer. Well, they were not as cool as 3 years ago. A little bit more warmth in spring, and they had a few flowers and a few pears both years. So the only great year was that year we had the heat. Now, back in the 80s, I was growing 12 Asian pears, and they were all doing well. But in the 80s, what we had were frost, heat, frost. Our winters would be frosty one week, be 80 degrees the next, be frosty again. I mean, we're going back and forth. It was crazy. But we were getting real cool winters and really hot warm-ups in the spring because we had no cloud cover those years in the late 80s. It was different. We thought we were in Central Valley. We were getting the temperatures Central Valley does. My pear trees did really well with those conditions. Cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, all winter and spring. And then we hit the 90s and it got all this gloom again and they stopped producing. I thought, God, the pear trees aren't doing anything at all. But then our customers kept telling me, and 10 years ago, my customers tell me, our pear trees are producing. Those were the hot years. 10 years ago were, 2012, 2013, 2014. We didn't have any winter at all. It was hot. And they were getting good Asian pears. So I started picking them up again. That's what we're noticing. You need some early heat. So the pear trees in Southern California were always grown in Palmdale, high desert. And they said they had an orchard back here in Trabuco Canyon or Silverado Canyon. So they get the early heat going. So we think that's what the pears need, is some heat in the spring to get them to wake up. But like apples need heat before summer. But if the pears get their heat too late, like my dad grew Bartlett pears in the 1960s, we'd get the fruit, but the fruit would only turn out this big because the trees woke up too late and pears ripen in summer. So the pears weren't getting good size at all. So the early heat seems to be needed, but so it depends where you live. If you live in Anaheim Hills, you'll have better luck than if you live in Newport. Some years they'll get fruit anywhere. So Hootsuite in 20th century. The other pears we're carrying, we got a few Southern King in. And I think they sent us one Tennessee. It's like, this is crazy, Tennessee. So both Southern King and Tennessee are crosses between a European pear called Tennessee and Hootsuite. This cross was done in Texas. They got Southern King and Tennessee. Both of these act like about the same as Hootsuite. We get some heat. They will fruit quite well. And these two both resemble European pears more than Asian pears. So my Caucasian employees like Tennessee better. I like Hootsuite better. And we also ordered Kiefer, which is another hybrid pear between the two that tastes more European. This is more reliable than the rest of them, but I haven't got any of those this year at the moment, although I might have some from last year in a pot. So these are all soft when they're ripe, and these are crispy. Any questions on the pear trees? So they're more susceptible to fire blight. We want to train them the same way. Pears also train well as espaliers. get the branches more horizontal, get more fruit. But just that pears haven't been, at least the better pears haven't been as reliable. So
No bosk. Doesn't grow well here.
haven't tried it. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's good to try something and see what you get.
Can you get it?
I have to order 5 at a time. That's the problem. They won't send us one tree. You can mail order. There's a good, I've been to their nursery. Name can't come up at the moment. It's Central California, and they're famous for mail ordering deciduous fruit trees. It is Laurel. Name will come up. I mean, if you look up deciduous bare root fruit trees on the internet, their name would probably come up. But it's in Central California on the coast, near the coast, and they would have that tree on stock, of course, because that's where they would do well.
But Dave Wilson doesn't try it in the Irvine place.
Not that I've heard of.
Oh.
They just did the apples.
Got it.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
That's sorry. So you can just treat the pear pretty much the same as the apple. Basically, everything you talked about at the beginning of the
Pretty much.
course. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And the apples, we should